variables in a 30,000 foot view. In every programming language, you will find variables. This also holds true for JavaScript. Essentially, variables are used to carry information. Without them, it wouldn't be really possible to code any applications. At some point in time, you always have to keep or transfer information in variables. In this JavaScript tutorial, I want to dive with you into JavaScript variable by example. So, as discussed in the previous video, JavaScript or variable are just a way to hold information. So this is actually the basics, kind of like a verbs in language. So this is the most basic syntax. So without it, you wouldn't be able to code because you wouldn't be able to store values or to differentiate different things, because at the end of the day, we're just manipulating those bits or 1 0 that turns into electricity. So at some point in time, you always have to keep or transfer information in variables. So you need to transfer or change things. You need to know which value owns which. In this JavaScript tutorial, I want to dive with you into JavaScript variables by example. So JavaScript variable, for instance, let's say we have the following JavaScript variable: var name equal Robin Weirich. Here the variable name carries the information Robin Weirich. Once you have such variable in JavaScript, you can reference it in your code. For instance, you can output something in JavaScript the following way: console.log string Robin Weirich, then semicolon. So instead of using the information explicitly, you can put the information into a variable and use this variable instead the implicit way. So we just console.log the name. So anything you write by default in a programming language became a variable, because you need to like put strings, and then you need to put open and close semi-curly bracket for object. Sorry, for strings, you need to put quotation mark for strings, open and close semi-curly bracket for objects. And then for its value, because at the end of the day, you need to have the left variable. It's also called variable in math. You need to have like a variable at the left and a value at the right. So it's just a mathematical concept that needs to be followed. Not only you can carry around the information in this variable and use it somewhere in your JavaScript code, you can use it more than once as well. So once you define that, the difference with this, I think in math as well, this is how logic works. So let's say you have x equals to 5, and then after that you can use the value of that variable that you define. So think about this like a logic way of thinking about things. It just makes sense in to think about this way mathematically. So it's more of a logical side of our brain rather than coming from a language or other rather from other, from the creative side of our brain. So not only you can carry around, but you can use it. So that's also what makes programming reusable. It also makes us it also what fundamentally makes programming automate a lot of things. Now imagine you're using a variable multiple times throughout your JavaScript application at different places. If you wouldn't have a variable and use the information explicitly, you would have to change it at many places. So if you want to change it, you would have to change it manually. So kind of like with beats. So if you have like a specific pattern with what those beats represent, you don't need to manually change it, right? You just need to change um, the representation of that thing. So you kind of like doing that here, but in a more in a human readable way. So like this var name equal Dennis Wirich. Actually, variables can be changed if you assign new value to them. You don't need the var statement though, because the variable can be declared before. So here var name equal Robin Wirich, console.log parameter name. Then we redeclare name equal Dennis Wirich. So we don't actually need let. So as discussed in the previous video, we use let, but in JavaScript, you don't actually need to use let unless you're using it for loop, or unless you actually need that. You just need to specify the name and the new value like this. So in this section, you have used a string primitive from a set of available JavaScript data types. In the following, you will learn more about this and other data types in JavaScript. So this quotation or quote, one quote, so that's different from backtick, just to not confuse whenever you encounter that. So this backtick is just one part, one part of the available JavaScript data types. In the following, you will learn more about these and other types in JavaScript. So head over to Code Sandbox, remove the JavaScript placeholder content, and play around with JavaScript variables. So JavaScript variables strings. A string primitive consists of one or multiple characters. So it's a character base, kind of like with devices with Linux. So we actually have character, block device, network device, and I forget the other. So we have three devices with Linux where we actually add modules as it connected to our operating system, because it would be like time consuming if you would like add that. So basically one of the device there is our processing character device. So that character is highly related to how JavaScript store the strings. So those devices like mainly store strings, or at least highly related to strings. So it has to be set in quotes, otherwise JavaScript would think it's just another variable. So var first name equal Robin, it would think it is a variable. So you can concatenate strings to a new string variable. So like here, var first name, and then console.log $sign first name. So this is what we do in or string interpolation we do with React as well. So as you can see, these principles are highly used in React. You can also define the other string as its own variable, like var name equal code $sign open semi-curly bracket first name closing semi-curly bracket, then $sign open semi-curly bracket last name closing semi-curly bracket quote semicolon, then console.log name. What you have done here is called string interpolation. So it's the same thing we do in React. By putting your new string into backticks instead of single quotes, Any JavaScript variable can be referenced with $sign, open and close semi-curly bracket in between to create a new JavaScript string. The backticks notation is called template literals in JavaScript. So this is actually not code. It's different from this when you define like a pure string. So that's actually a template literals. So as you can see, we have this first name and another string. So that's what we called concatenating string, not literally adding or plus, because as we mentioned, that's the old way of like adding in JavaScript, adding strings. So the new way is actually template literals with string interpolation. So in earlier JavaScript versions, template literal as a feature weren't available, and you would have used string concatenation instead of string interpolation with a plus operator, such as this: hello, comma, my name, still quote, plus first name, plus quote, plus last name, console.log sentence. So that's actually what you would do. You would add plus. So now you can remove the plus, just add a string interpolation for a variable inside that concatenated string. So that's for the basic of string primitive. So JavaScript string are only one of 6 JavaScript primitives, which are a subset of JavaScript data types. So exercise, let's keep that definition and declaration. A JavaScript variable is initialized the following way: var name equal Robin Wirach, semicolon. It only takes one step to declare and define a variable, but there's a difference between both. A variable declaration already takes place if no value is assigned to the variable, like this. So it will be undefined. So you're basically another information about this is when you define like this, you can use var and then just the name, and JavaScript will treat that as undefined. It will treat that as well as a variable, and then you will be able to reassign that value. Okay, so kind of like in math, you would be able to add like a value on that you can now use on other parts of the code. So in another step, the variable definition can take place because it has been declared before. There's no other declaration needed, but just an assignment. So in order to like use a variable, so a function is a variable as well. So in order to use a function, a variable, you need to declare that first. Sorry. Yeah. You need to declare that first. So declaring and defining is different. Declaring, you're saying that there exists this unique object or variable. Now defining is actually assigning a value to it. So here, for example, var name, console.log parameter name, then name equal Robin Wirach, then console.log name, it will be Robin Wirach because it has been declared. But for example, you define that without actually declaring it as a variable before, you will get an error. So you need to use var, and actually this var is not being used anymore. You usually need to use const first, and then let if you need to reassign it, or just the name. So and then the last is the let if you really need to assign it. So JavaScript variable can be reassigned to by just overwriting the defined value without another declaration. It's also called mutation of the variable or mutating the variable, which are just technical terms than changing a variable. So, like mutating, it's highly related with closures as well, because in order to create a function, you need to define a variable that will hold that function, and that to be able to like change the value inside that, you're kind of mutating. So that's the technical view of this. Later, this knowledge is useful because there's a difference between mutable and immutable data structures. After all, mutating a variable just means you're assigning the variable's value. So there are differences with that. Of course, if it's a constant variable, such as you define something as a constant, it means it can't be reassigned. So those are the immutable data structure. So the last code snippet showed that it's also possible to declare or define a new variable based on another declared variable. So if another declared variable already exists and the value for that exists, then you can assign your new variable to the value of that variable. But if that variable values change, since it's a variable, it's not a constant, the new defined value will also change. So JavaScript data types and data structures. In contrast to many other programming languages, JavaScript is loosely typed language, which only means that variables are not assigned to a particular data type. As you have learned before, a variable can be reassigned, which means it can also change the data type. So one of the things with loosely typed language, unlike with other language that is not loosely typed, is that you cannot you cannot change the data type in a variable. So let's say, because there's only like six primitive data types and then three object data types. So you can alternate between those data types if you're using other language. So as you have learned before, a variable can be reassigned, which means it can also change the data type. In the last code snippet, the variable was declared and defined as string primitive, reassigned to a number primitive, and reassigned to a boolean primitive. A JavaScript variable can be assigned to any data type. 7 of 8 data types in JavaScript primitives: string, number, boolean, undefined, null, big int, symbol. The 8th data type is an JavaScript object. Before exploring the JavaScript object, let's go through the most important JavaScript data types step by step with the simplest explanation for them. String consists of one or multiple characters defined in single or double quotes or backticks. So let me correct myself. A backticks can also be define the string in a double quotes and single quote. But for string interpolation with template literals, you have to use a backtick. Number consists of one or multiple numbers defined without quotes, also commonly called integer. Boolean can be either true or false. If it is defined, it's used to make decisions in an application. If a variable is declared but not defined, it is undefined. So again, this is important. So a variable needs to be declared for you to use its for you to do something in the code, because that kind of like think about this as a name. So in order for you to be able to like grab out of those bits or 10, you need to be able to put a name on it that will set it uniquely from other things, just like with variables as well. Verbs in a natural language. Null can only be null. It is used if a variable has intentionally no value. So we can use null. So the way we use null is we actually need to put the null equal in the right side of the equal sign of the variable, and the undefined is that um, you need to not define something. I think yeah, you can also use or put this as a value, undefined. Here, undefined. But there's two ways to do this undefined. Just declare the variable without value. So very rarely you will use big int or symbol in JavaScript. That's why I keep them out for this introduction to JavaScript variable for the sake of keeping you in flow for this learning experience. You can read more about those in the exercise below. Now, then there are JavaScript objects. For the sake of keeping it beginner friendly again, I will introduce the object as a more complex JavaScript data structure that allows us to hold more other information than just a string or number. So an object could have a value of an object and those primitives that we have discussed. So aside from aside from object, there's also more nuanced kind of object, which is like a function, a array, a tuple. So those could get complicated, but they are all variables. So those 7 primitives and the object data types are all variables. I mean, yeah, you need to store that in a variable, whether it's a constant variable, immutable, or mutable. The most commonly used objects in JavaScript are object, array, and function. Now, correct, a JavaScript object is the general term for the data structure, but a specific data structure in itself too. Let's dive into all specific data structures. Here, an array is used to hold a list of information. The entries in the list can have any data. So here var names equals this. So an array is really a list that can hold any data type, any primitive data type. However, usually all entries in an array have the same data type, which doesn't mean that it's not possible to have an array with different data types like integers, boolean strings, in contrast to objects. In contrast to objects, arrays have specific order. So the difference with arrays and objects is that array has an order, so it's a contiguous in memory. But an object, again, it's by default contiguous as well. But sometimes in JavaScript, if it's a complex object, it becomes non-contiguous. So it becomes like node data structure. So we will continue with this.